So imagine you have just come home from the absolute worst day of your career.
Right, you're totally exhausted.
Exactly. You are beaten down, you are stressed, and you walk through your front door looking for just 5 minutes of comfort. A safe harbor.
Just a little bit of emotional
Yeah.
support.
You drop your bag, you let out this heavy sigh, and you look at your partner and you say, I am so overwhelmed today. But instead of a hug or, instead of a sympathetic ear, you get a heavy sigh in return.
A sudden stiffening of their posture.
Yes, exactly. And then comes this quiet, sort of pained voice that says, you bringing this negative energy into the house is making my anxiety spike. I really can't handle your stress right now.
It is a breathtaking sleight of hand.
It really is. So let's freeze that moment for a second. How did that happen?
Hmm.
Within 30 seconds of asking for support, the entire power dynamic in the room just completely inverted.
And suddenly you are the one apologizing to them for having a bad day.
Right. And it happens so smoothly, so quietly, that the target doesn't even realize a transaction just occurred.
Because when you hear the word narcissist, you don't picture that quiet, anxious partner.
No, not at all. You picture the loud, arrogant CEO, right? The person dominating the dinner party, bragging about their yacht, demanding the absolute best table in the restaurant.
It's the stereotype we've all been trained to look for. You see that person coming from a mile away.
But today, we want you to completely forget that stereotype. Because today, we are hunting a ghost.
A psychological predator that doesn't announce itself with grandiosity or volume.
No. Instead, it hides behind a flawless, completely impenetrable mask of intense vulnerability, sensitivity, and, honestly, chronic victimhood.
Today, we are dissecting the covert or vulnerable narcissist.
And this isn't just a casual conversation about difficult personalities, This is an elite behavioral profiling session. As a profiler, I look at the behavioral forensics, the invisible tactics used to control and manipulate.
But to really understand those tactics, we need to look under the hood. We have to see what's actually powering that machinery.
Exactly. That's why we're going to decode the clinical pathology beneath this mask. And I need to set the stakes for you, the listener, right now. As we peel back these layers of human behavior today, you are going to feel a profound sense of unease.
You really are. Because you might start recognizing the communication patterns of your boss.
Or your ex. Or your parent.
Or, depending on how deeply we look into the mechanics of human insecurity here, you might even recognize parts of yourself.
Yeah. This investigation is designed to be uncomfortable. It is going to be entirely unpredictable, and it is going to fundamentally shift your paradigm of human behavior.
Because by the end of this deep dive, you will possess the ability to recognize manipulation patterns that most people never see, even after decades of marriage or employment.
So let's jump right in at the surface level. Layer 1. What you can actually observe in the wild. Because the very first misconception we need to dismantle is the idea that narcissists are inherently extroverted, outgoing people.
Right, that myth is actually the ultimate retention mechanic of this pathology. It is the perfect evolutionary camouflage.
How so?
Well, if you look at subclinical studies, meaning research on the general population, not just hospitalized psychiatric patients, you see that covert narcissists score incredibly high in two very specific personality traits.
Which are?
Introversion and neuroticism.
Okay, so meaning they are inward-focused and highly prone to negative emotions like anxiety, worry, fear.
Exactly. They do not walk into a room and demand all the attention. They present as shy, quiet, highly self-deprecating, fragile even.
Interesting.
They're often the person sitting on the periphery of a group who seems so deeply, almost painfully attuned to the suffering in the world.
And as a profiler, I can tell you that this presentation is incredibly disarming. If you are walking through the world with your radar up, looking out for an arrogant, loud predator, your threat detection system will completely ignore the quiet, sensitive soul in the corner.
You essentially bypass your own security protocol.
You really do. So if the disguise is this flawless, how do we spot the red flags? Like before the trap closes, what is the very first behavioral anomaly a person might notice?
The initial hook is a phenomenon we can call weaponized attunement.
Weaponized attunement. I like that. Explain that for me.
When you first meet this person, they won't brag about themselves. Instead, they will focus entirely on you, but in a way that feels almost supernatural.
Like they are totally zeroed in on you.
Yes, they will act like they know you incredibly well, incredibly fast. It feels like this profound, instant soul connection.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that. People often call this love bombing, Right.
They do, but the traditional idea of love bombing is someone buying you lavish gifts or taking you on a private jet or whatever.
Right. Big, flashy
This
gestures.
is very different. This is emotional love bombing. It's a sudden, intense mirroring of your deepest values and your deepest pains.
But here's the question we have to answer for the listener. When they are looking into your eyes and seemingly feeling all your pain, what is actually happening in their brain? Is that empathy genuine?
It is a meticulously crafted illusion. The clinical literature is definitive on this. They possess a severe deficit in true emotional empathy.
And emotional empathy is when you actually feel the sadness of another person, right?
Exactly. If you cry, I feel sad. That's emotional empathy. What they have is highly developed cognitive empathy.
Okay, so they can rationally understand what you are feeling without actually feeling it themselves.
Precisely. They are highly observant. They aren't connecting with your soul. They are data mining your psychology.
Data mining, wow.
It is a sophisticated mapping of your insecurities. They are running a diagnostic on you to find out exactly what your unmet needs are.
To figure out exactly what you need to hear.
Yes, so they can become the perfect, custom-tailored puzzle piece to fit exactly into your life.
So you think you finally met a kindred spirit, someone who, just gets you. But in reality, you've just voluntarily handed over the blueprints to your own psychological vulnerabilities.
You're telling them exactly how to manipulate you later.
That's terrifying. It really is. Now, what happens when this highly attuned, sensitive person interacts with someone who doesn't offer them psychological data, let's say a purely transactional interaction?
This is where we apply the waiter test. It's a classic behavioral observation tool.
Right, because maintaining the sensitive, deeply empathetic facade has to require an immense amount of cognitive and emotional energy.
A staggering amount. They can sustain it with you, the primary target, because you are the supply they are trying to secure.
But with a stranger?
In transactional relationships, with a waiter, a cashier, an Uber driver, the mask often slips.
Walk me through a scenario. What does that slip actually look like in real time?
Imagine you are on a third date. You're at a really nice restaurant. The covert narcissist has spent the last hour looking deeply into your eyes, validating your difficult childhood, appearing to be the most gentle soul on earth.
Like a perfect date so far.
Exactly. Then the waiter comes over, but he forgets to bring the extra dressing they asked for.
A minor inconvenience. A totally mundane error.
An emotionally healthy person might not even mention it, or they just politely remind the waiter. But the covert narcissist's demeanor shifts instantly.
What do?
Their voice drops an octave. They don't yell. That would be too overt. Instead, they become icily entitled. They might look at the waiter and say, with this tone of quiet disgust, I specifically asked for the dressing on the side. Is it really that difficult to write things down?
Ugh, just cutting right through them.
It's a sudden, jarring display of superiority and callousness directed at someone they view as fundamentally beneath them in that moment.
And as the person sitting across the table, you feel this sudden spike of cognitive dissonance. You think, wait a minute, this person was just crying with me about my rescue dog 5 minutes ago, and now they are treating this waiter like absolute dirt.
It doesn't compute.
It doesn't. So let's say you confront them. Let's say you say, hey, that was a little harsh, don't you think? What is their immediate behavioral response?
Evasiveness and victimization. The mask instantly snaps back into place, but now it's highly defensive.
So they don't apologize. Oh, never. They won't say, you're right, I was rude. They will shift the narrative to make themselves the victim of the waiter's incompetence. They'll say something like, I'm just so sensitive to feeling ignored. When people don't listen to me, it triggers my anxiety.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Truly brilliant in a dark way. They just took a moment where they were objectively cruel and reframed it so that they are the victim of the waiter.
Yes.
But if you watch closely, right before they deploy that victim narrative, you might catch a microexpression.
Contempt.
Exactly. A fleeting tightening of the lips, a slight roll of the eyes. As a profiler, contempt is the ultimate leakage of a hidden superiority complex.
It always leaks out eventually.
But this brings us to a massive structural question. If they are so introverted, so neurotic, and so easily threatened by a waiter for getting salad dressing, how do they successfully hook long-term targets?
That's the big question.
Right, because an extroverted, grandiose narcissist hooks you with charm, wealth, and power. You want to be near their glow. How does this fragile, anxious person pull you into their orbit? They utilize the rescue dynamic. This is a very specific, incredibly potent form of psychological entanglement.
So they don't hook you by presenting themselves as better than you.
No. They hook you by presenting a profound, tragic wound that only you are special enough to heal.
Ah, so they appeal to the target's ego. You are the only one who understands my pain.
Yes, they're the unappreciated genius whose last boss stole their ideas. Or they're the perfectly loving, devoted partner who is tragically, inexplicably abused by every single one of their crazy exes.
Always the victim.
Always. They present themselves as a fragile bird with a broken wing. And human beings, especially empathetic ones, have a deeply ingrained biological drive to nurture and heal.
Which transitions us perfectly into layer 2, the mechanics of coercive control. Because if they hook you with this vulnerability, how do they ultimately control you? Control is the end game here, right?
Absolutely. And the primary weapon they wield is the victim mentality itself. Dr. Ramani, a leading clinical psychologist in this field, points out that the covert narcissist's entire identity architecture is built around being misunderstood or perpetually underappreciated.
So they literally walk through life with the core belief that the universe is inherently rigged against them.
They do. They harbor what we call unseen gifts.
Meaning they believe they are fundamentally superior, but the world is just too stupid to recognize it.
Exactly. And by adopting the role of the perpetual victim, they execute this brilliant, almost unassailable strategic maneuver. They make it mathematically impossible for you to ever hold them accountable.
Because in our cultural narrative, if you criticize a victim, you become the abuser, you become the villain.
It's a complete inversion of reality.
To see how this invisible power dynamic functions in real time, we have to look at a behavioral pattern I call the conversation boomerang. This is the absolute core of their communication style.
I love that term. Let's break down the forensics of the conversation boomerang.
All right, let's go back to the scenario we opened the deep dive with. The listener comes home. They say, I had a terrible day at work. My boss yelled at me. I'm just so exhausted.
And we established that the covert narcissist responds with, you being so stressed out all the time makes my anxiety so much worse. I can't handle this negative energy right now.
Okay, let's dissect the invisible transaction taking place here, line by line. When the partner says, I had a terrible day, they are extending a bid for connection.
They're asking for emotional regulation from their partner.
Right. And what does the narcissist's response actually mean? Like, if we strip away the words and look at the functional intent.
The functional intent of I can't handle your negative energy is your needs are an inconvenience to my emotional equilibrium.
Wow.
The target of their statement isn't your bad day. The target is your guilt.
Yes. They are actively weaponizing your empathy against you. The power shift is immediate and dizzying.
It really is.
You walked through the door needing comfort. 30 seconds later, the boomerang has hit you in the back of the head. You are now apologizing for having a bad day, and you are actively comforting them for the stress that your bad day caused their nervous system.
It is a masterclass in emotional subjugation.
It's just wild.
And because they are inherently conflict avoidant, because they fear the exposure of a direct, screaming argument, they utilize passive-aggressive warfare.
So they don't throw plates.
No. They use the silent treatment. They use subtle sabotage. They use indirect insults wrapped in layers of faux concern.
Okay, give me an example of an indirect insult wrapped in concern. I want the listener to really picture this.
Okay, imagine you're getting ready for a dinner party, and you put on a new outfit you're really excited about.
Feeling good about yourself.
Exactly. The covert narcissist looks at you, tilts their head sympathetically and says, are you sure you want to wear that? It's just, you've seemed so exhausted lately. I thought you'd want to wear something a little more forgiving. I just want you to feel comfortable.
Oh, that is lethal. That is absolutely lethal.
Because if you get angry, you look insane.
Right, because they just said they want you to feel comfortable. But the invisible transaction was a direct attack on your self-esteem.
It was entirely designed to make you feel small and unsteady before walking into a social situation where they might have to share the spotlight.
It is death by 1,000 paper cuts. And over months and years, it leaves the victim completely disoriented. They begin doubting their own reality, their own memory, their own worth.
Which is the clinical definition of gaslighting.
Exactly. One victim in the literature described this exact dynamic by saying, I felt like I became part of their reality to the point where I didn't even have my own thoughts anymore. My entire brain was just predicting their moods.
Which is a horrifying way to live.
Okay, I have to stop you here, though, because I want to push back on this heavily.
Go ahead.
I'm playing devil's advocate for the listener who's thinking, well, my partner isn't a malicious mastermind. We keep using terms like strategy, tactics, weaponizing. But you just established earlier that these people score off the charts in neuroticism.
Yes, they do.
Their anxiety is real, so aren't they just genuinely overwhelmed by their own hypersensitivity? Like, are we calling them evil masterminds when in reality they are just profoundly psychologically broken people who literally lack the nervous system capacity to handle a partner's bad day?
That is the exact intellectual tension that keeps clinical psychologists up at night.
The debate between intentional malice and pathological deficit.
Exactly. And the answer is complex because it is a fusion of both. We must acknowledge that the brokenness is real. Their nervous system is truly dysregulated.
So when you come home and say you had a bad day, their cortisol levels genuinely spike. They feel real panic.
They do. They are not faking the anxiety.
Okay.
However, the pathology lies in the pattern of how they use that dysregulation to control their environment.
I see.
They have learned over a lifetime that their pain is a highly effective tool for evading accountability and subjugating the needs of others.
So they might not consciously plan it.
Right, they may not sit in a dark room twirling a mustache, plotting to ruin your evening. But their psychological operating system automatically deploys victimization to ensure they never have to compromise.
So intentional or not, it functions as a highly effective, inescapable system of coercive control.
Precisely. The effect on the victim is identical to calculated malice.
That is a crucial distinction. The function of the behavior is control, regardless of the conscious intent behind it. So we've mapped out how this operates in the intimate one-on-one dynamic. Let's expand the lens to layer 3.
The broader social world.
Yes, because this introduces a terrifying Jekyll and Hyde dynamic, which reveals their hidden motivations.
There is typically a massive, jarring discrepancy between a covert narcissist's public persona and their private reality.
What does that look like?
In public, they can be absolute pillars of the community. They might volunteer for every committee. They might appear deeply empathetic, heavily involved in local charities or religious organizations. They will literally bend over backward to help a neighbor.
But wait, why? If they're so exhausted by interaction, why expend the energy?
Because they harvest a tremendous amount of narcissistic supply, external validation from being perceived as the good guy, the selfless martyr, the unsung hero.
Because it feeds that core delusion of superiority.
Exactly. It validates their internal narrative.
But behind closed doors, when there is no audience to applaud their martyrdom.
Behind closed doors, they are entirely depleted. They become dismissive, deeply resentful, unkind, and emotionally vacant.
And this stark contrast creates a phenomenon within the household that is truly devastating. The covert narcissist effectively becomes the emotional thermostat for the entire family system.
Yes, meaning they entirely dictate the climate of the house. Whatever mood they are in, the whole house must adopt.
So everyone else in the home, the spouse, the children, is forced into a chronic state of hypervigilance.
Think about what that does to a family over years.
Yeah.
You are constantly making preemptive adjustments.
You learn their micro-expressions.
You walk on eggshells, trying to anticipate their mood the exact moment you hear their car pull into the driveway.
Why? Because you are desperately trying to avoid triggering a shame spiral or an explosive defensive reaction to some minor or entirely imagined criticism.
You live your entire life trying not to trip an invisible, constantly shifting laser security system.
Which brings up a genuinely terrifying scientific finding from our sources. Let's talk about the dark tetrad in personality psychology.
This is where the data gets very dark.
For the listener, the dark tetrad consists of 4 malevolent personality traits. Machiavellianism, which is manipulation and deceit. Psychopathy, which is lack of empathy and remorse. Sadism, which is taking pleasure in others' pain. And narcissism.
Right. And logically, you would assume that the loud, arrogant, grandiose narcissist would score the highest on these dark traits.
Exactly. And you would assume the quiet, sensitive, covert narcissist would score much lower.
It is entirely counterintuitive, but the data points to the exact opposite.
Wait, really?
Yes. There is a specific subset called communal narcissism, people who use charity and grand gestures to feed their ego, which actually correlates with some pro-social traits. But vulnerable, covert narcissism.
Yeah.
The empirical research shows it is positively and significantly correlated with psychopathy, sadism, and high neuroticism.
Wait, sadism? You're telling me the fragile victim takes pleasure in causing pain.
It is a quiet, passive sadism. It's the satisfaction they feel when they withhold affection and watch you beg for it.
Oh, wow.
It's the subtle smirk when they manage to ruin a holiday with their sour mood. It is a highly egocentric, socially sensitive, and quietly destructive personality configuration.
Which forces us to ask the ultimate profiling question. What is the payoff? Human behavior is always driven by a payoff. If they are so miserable, so anxious, so easily wounded, why employ this specific destructive strategy?
The core motivation, the dark engine driving this behavior, is envy. Unadulterated, corrosive envy.
Envy of what, though?
Envy of other people's success, their happiness, their authentic relationships, even their possessions. Remember, their internal narrative is that they are fundamentally superior but tragically unrecognized.
Right.
Therefore, seeing someone else thrive, even their own spouse or child, feels like a direct existential attack on their reality. If you succeed, it means they are failing.
It's a zero-sum game in their mind.
Exactly. So they must use subtle minimization and constant devaluation to pull you down.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Say you come home excited about a promotion at work. They won't celebrate. They will say, well, that's great, but it's going to mean you have less time for the family. I guess I'll just have to handle everything around the house alone again.
They just completely puncture your joy.
Because it's the only way they can alleviate their own crippling feelings of inadequacy.
Okay, let's hold on to that thought because we're about to move to layer 4 and pull the rug completely out from under the listener. We've been discussing the covert narcissist as if they're a completely different species from the grandiose narcissist.
Like they're two entirely separate categories of humans.
Exactly. The loud, arrogant predator on one side and the quiet, anxious predator on the other.
And if you look at basic subclinical studies, meaning you just give surveys to random college students or people in the general population, they do look like completely unrelated disorders.
Right. In everyday people, the statistical correlation between grandiose traits and vulnerable traits hovers right around 0. They seem like opposites.
But the heavy clinical evidence, the deep data, tells a completely different, mind-blowing story.
And this is where we have to dive into the methodology of latent variable structural equation modeling. I know that sounds like incredibly dense statistical jargon, but I want to unpack how this study was actually done.
Because the result changes everything we know about narcissism.
It really does. So let's strip away the jargon and look at the methodology. Researchers wanted to know what happens if we remove basic human temperament from the equation. Right.
Yes. We know grandiose narcissists are extroverted. We know vulnerable narcissists are introverted and neurotic.
So temperament is just your baseline hardware, how outgoing you are, how easily stressed you are.
Right. Those temperaments act like a thick disguise, hiding the underlying core of the personality.
Okay.
In structural equation modeling, statisticians take massive data sets and use mathematical modeling to literally extract the variables of extroversion, introversion, and neuroticism.
They say, let's statistically pretend everyone has the exact same baseline temperament and look at what remains.
Exactly.
And when they mathematically strip away the introversion and extroversion, what happens to the data?
The correlation between grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism skyrockets to 0.63.
Which in psychological research, a 0.63 correlation is massive.
It is statistically undeniable.
Wait, so what you're saying is, underneath the disguise of being a loud extrovert or a quiet introvert, they are the exact same predator.
Yes. This is known as the mask model. They share the exact same pathological core.
Wow.
Both are driven by intense delusional entitlement, profound interpersonal antagonism, and an absolute lack of emotional empathy.
So why do they act so differently?
Because the grandiose narcissist won the genetic lottery of having an extroverted low neuroticism temperament.
Ah, so that extroversion acts as a suit of emotional armor.
Yes, it protects their delusions of grandeur. They can confidently tell the world how great they are and just brush off criticism.
But the covert narcissist...
The covert narcissist has the exact same delusions of grandeur, the exact same entitlement, but they lack the extroverted armor. Their introverted, highly anxious temperament leaves them completely exposed and raw to the world.
They want to be worshipped just as much as the grandiose narcissist, but they are too terrified of criticism to demand it out loud. Let me try to build an analogy for this, because this is a massive paradigm shift. It's like they are both running the exact same malicious software code, but on 2 different operating systems.
I like where this is going.
Right, so the grandiose narcissist is a loud, flashy desktop application. It takes over your whole screen, it plays live music, it demands all your bandwidth, you know it's a virus immediately.
Yep.
The covert narcissist is running the exact same malicious code, but it's a silent background app. It doesn't put any windows on your screen. You don't even know it's running.
But it is slowly, quietly draining your entire battery.
Tracking your keystrokes, consuming your memory until your whole system just suddenly crashes.
That is a phenomenal analogy. It perfectly captures the mechanics of the mask model. And the research goes even further to prove this using EMA, or ecological momentary assessment.
What exactly is an EMA study? Like, how do they track that?
In an EMA study, researchers don't just ask people to remember how they felt last week. They give participants a device, like a specialized smartphone app, that pings them randomly 5 to 10 times a day for a month.
Okay, so it interrupts them in real time.
Yes. Every time it pings, the person has to immediately log their current emotional state, their thoughts, and their behaviors right in that exact moment.
It provides a real-time, granular map of human consciousness.
And what did the EMA data reveal about these two so-called different types of narcissists?
What did it show?
It proved that these aren't even static, permanent identities. They oscillate moment to moment.
Oscillate.
Yes. If you track them over a single day, a predominantly covert, vulnerable narcissist will have sudden, intense flashes of grandiose arrogance.
Really? Like, maybe they're driving in traffic and suddenly explode with rage, screaming that everyone else is an idiot and they are the only competent driver on Earth. It's a flash of pure grandiosity.
And what about the grandiose narcissist? Conversely, the loud, grandiose narcissists experience rapid, terrifying collapses into profound vulnerability, shame, and self-pity when their ego takes a hit, like if they get fired or publicly humiliated.
They flip back and forth.
They're two sides of the same coin. The only difference is that the vulnerable narcissist spends 90% of their time in the collapsed, defensive victim state, while the grandiose narcissist spends 90% of their time in the inflated state.
Wow. So if you are listening to this right now and you've spent the last 3 years in therapy trying to figure out if your mother or your husband is overt or covert, the answer is yes.
They are both. It just depends on the hour, the trigger, and the environment.
Which forces us to move to layer 5, opening the black box of their unconscious mind. To truly understand why this software is so malicious, we have to look at the core emotional driver powering the whole system.
And that engine, the absolute core of narcissism, is unresolved existential shame.
But we must be very precise here. We have to contrast explicit shame with implicit shame. Break those down for me.
Implicit shame is automatic, hidden, deeply buried in the unconscious. The grandiose narcissist pushes all their shame down into the implicit level.
They do not feel it consciously.
No. If you ask them if they feel inadequate, they will laugh at you.
But the covert narcissist...
The covert narcissist is drowning in explicit shame. It is entirely conscious. They know they feel worthless.
You can actually see it in their physical presentation, right?
Yes. Their body language is minimizing. Downcast eyes, slumped shoulders, constant sighing. They possess what clinical psychology calls contingent self-esteem.
Contingent upon what?
Contingent upon rigid external perfection. Their entire sense of worth is tied to impossible standards. Perfect approval from a partner, perfect grades, flawless performance at work.
Because they have no internal sense of self-worth, they have to import it from the outside.
Exactly. So they're basically emotional vampires. But instead of blood, they are constantly feeding on external validation just to maintain a baseline sense of existence.
And when the world inevitably fails to meet their impossible standards, when the waiter forgets the dressing or the partner has a bad day, their imported self-worth plummets to absolute zero.
They don't just feel disappointed, they experience it as a literal neurological threat to their existence.
Their survival is threatened by a perceived slight.
Yes.
We actually have a diagnostic tool for measuring the exact mechanisms of this, right? The Pathological Narcissism Inventory, or PNI. It isolates the specific subscales driving this behavior.
The PNI is a brilliant instrument. It breaks vulnerable narcissism down into specific, measurable drivers. We just discussed contingent self-esteem.
The CSE subscale.
Right. Another massive driver is hiding the self, or HS.
What is that?
This is the chronic paralyzing terror that if people see their true, flawed self, they will be universally rejected. So they must maintain the perfect victim or perfect helper mask at all costs.
Then there's devaluing, or DEV.
Yes, putting others down to artificially inflate their own worth. But the most volatile subscale, the one that makes them so dangerous to partners, is entitlement rage, or ER.
Okay, let's stop right there. Entitlement rage. This is the central paradox that makes them so maddeningly difficult to understand.
It is the ultimate contradiction.
You just explained that they feel completely worthless. They're drowning in explicit shame. They hate themselves. Yet simultaneously, they feel entirely entitled to special treatment, and they explode with rage when they don't get it.
Right.
How can a human brain hold both of those concepts? How can you feel like absolute garbage and a god at the exact same time?
That intense cognitive dissonance is the very definition of their pathology. It is the engine of their lifelong suffering.
Explain that feeling for me.
Imagine walking through every single day believing you are an undiscovered genius, destined for unparalleled greatness, but simultaneously harboring a core belief that you are fundamentally defective, unlovable, and broken.
It sounds like psychological torture.
It is. And that agonizing tension results in pathological perfectionism. But it's a very specific strain. Socially prescribed perfectionism.
Meaning?
They aren't trying to be excellent because they love the craft or for the joy of achievement. They are driven by a sheer, absolute terror of failure.
Because they believe that any flaw, any mistake, any crack in the facade will lead to total abandonment by everyone around them.
Exactly.
So we move to layer 6. How does a human mind fracture into this specific, painful configuration? No one is born this way. We have to trace the pathology back to its genesis. How do you make a covert narcissist?
To understand the developmental origins, we turn to Heinz Kohut, one of the giants of psychoanalysis and self-psychology.
Kohut's theories are foundational here.
Yes. Kohut theorized that every infant and toddler needs empathic caregivers to validate their emerging emotions. He called this process mirroring.
Give me a real-world example of mirroring. What does a healthy parent do?
A healthy parent acts as an emotional mirror. A toddler points at a dog, their eyes go wide with excitement, and they look back at the mother. The healthy mother smiles back with equal excitement, saying, "Wow, look at that big dog."
Validating the emotion.
Right. Or the child feels sad and cries. The parent acknowledges the sadness, holds them, and says, "It's okay to be sad."
So through this thousands of times repeated process of mirroring, the child learns that their internal experiences are real, valid, and safe.
This builds a cohesive, solid identity.
But when that mirroring fails,
When parents are emotionally unavailable, deeply neglectful, or actively shaming of a child's vulnerable emotions, the child experiences a profound developmental arrest.
they learn very early on that their true self, their actual organic feelings, are either unacceptable, burdensome, or dangerous.
Exactly.
Our sources highlight a specific disturbing case example of how this forms. It's not always obvious abuse. Often it's parents who heavily overvalue a child's achievements, but actively punish their emotional vulnerability.
Yes. It's the parent who boasts to the neighborhood when the child gets straight A's or wins the spelling bee, showering them in praise.
But when that same child comes to the parent crying because they are scared of the dark,
Or sad about a friend, the parent snaps, "Stop crying, you're embarrassing me, get over it."
that transaction is lethal to a developing brain.
Absolutely lethal, because the child internalizes a horrifying dynamic. They realize, I am only loved, I only exist when I perform greatness. My actual feelings of fear, sadness, or need are disgusting and will get me rejected.
So to survive this environment, the child's psyche does something drastic.
It splits.
It creates a secondary false self. Clinically, this is referred to as the narcissistic alien self.
The alien self.
That sounds like a concept from a sci-fi horror film, but it's a terrifying psychological reality.
It is a profound defense mechanism. This alien self is constructed entirely of what the parents want to see: the perfect student, the quiet victim, the stoic achiever.
It hides their true, primary emotions deep in the unconscious.
But because this alien self is a false construct, it has no internal substance. It creates a permanent, agonizing void inside the core of the person.
Their nervous system becomes permanently, structurally tuned to anticipate rejection and shame in every human interaction.
And as a profiler, I see exactly how this ties into attachment theory.
Right, let's connect those dots.
If we look at the grandiose narcissist, they almost always display a dismissive, avoidant attachment style. They don't think they need anyone. They view others as tools. But the covert narcissist is entirely different.
The covert narcissist aligns with the disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment style.
This is crucial for the listener to understand. The covert narcissist desperately, overwhelmingly craves emotional closeness and love.
That's what makes him so different from the purely avoidant, grandiose type.
Exactly. But they sabotage it anyway.
Why?
Because while they crave intimacy, they're absolutely terrified of it. Remember their core belief: if you see the real me, you will abandon me.
They expect that their entitled needs will never be met, and they experience deep, agonizing shame for needing anything from anyone at all.
So the moment you get close to them, the moment they start to feel reliant on your love, their terror activates. and they push you away, devalue you, or pick a fight to create distance.
It is an endless push-pull cycle of craving intimacy and attacking it when it arrives.
It is exhausting for everyone involved.
Okay, I have to ask the hard question here. I can hear the listener's empathy kicking in. We just described a heartbreaking childhood of emotional neglect, the creation of an alien self, a desperate fear of abandonment.
It's incredibly sad.
It is. Is this etiology just an extreme form of abuse or just incredibly bad parenting? Because it makes you want to forgive them for everything.
It's vital to clarify the role of childhood emotional abuse, or CEA, in the literature. Chronic invalidation, demeaning comments, unpredictable discipline where the child never knows if they will be praised as a genius or punished as a burden. This is a severe form of emotional abuse.
It creates a chronically invalidating environment that fractures the personality.
However, as clinical professionals, we must draw an absolute, non-negotiable line in the sand. Etiology is an explanation. It is never a justification.
Meaning, understanding why they are abusive doesn't give them a pass for being abusive.
Exactly. The fact that they suffered profound trauma in their childhood does not give them a license to emotionally destroy their current spouse or traumatize their own children.
Empathy for their past should never equal submission to their present abuse.
Never.
Which brings us directly out of the origin story and right back into layer 7, the blast radius.
The consequences for the victim.
And the comorbidities of the narcissist.
Yeah.
If you are a listener who is living with this person right now, what is actually happening to your brain?
The most severe long-term consequence for the victim is the systematic erosion of self-trust.
We touched on gaslighting earlier, but the neurological and psychological toll it takes over years is profound.
The victim is constantly subjected to the narcissist's shifting reality, their relentless blame shifting, their blatant denial of events that just
The
happened.
classic, I never said that. You're remembering it wrong. You're crazy.
Over time, the victim's brain literally stops trusting its own perception. They start to accept the narcissist's reality just to keep the peace.
You essentially become an extension of their defense mechanism. You give up your own reality to stabilize theirs.
Yes.
But this leads to a question I get constantly. Why do people stay? If it's this damaging, why not just leave? The internet loves to throw around the phrase trauma bonding. You hear it on every TikTok video about toxic relationships.
You really do.
Is a trauma bond what's keeping the victim trapped with a covert narcissist?
That is a massive misconception that we need to destroy right now. The internet uses trauma bonding as a catch-all phrase for every bad relationship.
Clinically, what is a true trauma bond?
Clinically, a true trauma bond is defined by extreme fear, severe cycles of abuse, and intermittent reinforcement like a hostage situation or severe domestic violence.
And while that can happen with narcissists, very often with covert narcissists, it's not a trauma bond at all.
It is something much more painful. Complex love.
Break down complex love. What is the difference?
Complex love means the good parts of the relationship are actually real. Remember, the covert narcissist has high cognitive empathy and high emotional sensitivity.
They are genuinely capable of moments of profound connection.
They can have periods of real attunement, infectious enthusiasm, shared humor, and vulnerability. When they are regulated, they can be wonderful.
Which is exactly what makes leaving so agonizing.
Precisely. You aren't staying out of pure, terrified trauma bonding. You are staying because you genuinely love the person who appears in those good moments.
The tragedy of the covert narcissist is that the good parts of them are real, but their underlying personality structure makes those good parts completely unsustainable.
You aren't just walking away from a monster. You're walking away from someone you deeply love, who genuinely suffers, but whose pathology is actively destroying your sanity.
And their pathology doesn't just hurt the partner. It manifests in severe psychiatric comorbidities for the narcissists themselves. Let's talk about that.
Covert narcissism is highly correlated with social anxiety disorder.
But as you look at the data, it's a very specific, strange kind of social anxiety.
It is. Think about a typical person with social anxiety. They are afraid of being judged as inadequate. They worry they will say something stupid or spill their drink.
Why is the covert narcissist anxious?
They avoid social situations because they are terrified. Their inherent grandiosity won't be universally recognized.
So they are afraid of being seen as a loser. They are afraid of not being treated as a king.
Exactly. If they go to a party and aren't immediately treated as the most fascinating, intelligent, deeply feeling person in the room, it triggers an existential shame spiral.
Their fragile ego can't handle being average in a crowd.
So they stay home, they isolate, and they resent everyone at the party for being too shallow to understand them.
We also see incredibly high rates of eating disorders in this population, right?
Yes, using rigid, obsessive control over their body to manage their fragile, contingent self-worth.
So we've established that the pain is real, the love is real sometimes, and the pathology is deeply entrenched. The listener is asking the ultimate question right now. Can this be fixed? How does a victim know when to keep trying and when to leave?
I have to deliver the harsh reality of clinical psychology here. Love cannot cure a personality structure.
You cannot love someone into having a cohesive sense of self.
No amount of patience, no amount of perfect communication, and no amount of your own suffering will rewire their childhood developmental arrest.
Which leads us to layer 8, the final phase of our deep dive. Interventions, boundaries, and the societal engines manufacturing this behavior. Can this be fixed clinically? Can we fix it culturally? And what is the immediate survival manual for the listener?
Let's look at the clinical side first, because there's a brutal therapeutic paradox with covert narcissists.
What is the paradox?
Unlike grandiose narcissists, who think they are perfect and absolutely refuse to go to therapy, the covert narcissist is in immense, genuine pain. And that pain often drives them into a therapist's office.
That sounds like a good thing. They want help.
It is a good first step, but their pathology makes them almost impossible to treat with standard therapy.
Because of their hypersensitivity to criticism.
Exactly. The moment a therapist offers neutral feedback or gently challenges a cognitive distortion, the covert narcissist perceives it as a devastating, malicious attack.
They feel instantly shamed.
They devalue the therapist as incompetent or just not understanding them, and they quit.
However, our sources highlight some breakthrough evidence-based protocols that are actually showing promise. They compared schema-focused therapy against the Unified Protocol, or UP.
This is one of the most fascinating clinical findings in recent years. Schema therapy has been the gold standard for personality disorders.
And it works decently well for grandiose traits because it tackles their deeply ingrained beliefs about entitlement.
But for the covert, vulnerable narcissist, researchers found that the Unified Protocol is vastly superior.
Why? What does UP do differently?
Because UP doesn't just sit there and argue with their delusional beliefs. UP is designed to directly target the underlying nervous system. It treats their acute emotional dysregulation, their chronic anger, and their sheer terror of intimacy.
So it teaches them how to sit with a negative emotion like shame without automatically deploying a defense mechanism that attacks their partner.
It treats the somatic dysregulation first, before trying to change the ego.
That is the microclinical level. But as a profiler, I always want to zoom out to the macro level. Where are we as a culture manufacturing these people? Because this isn't just happening in a vacuum.
We have to look at the societal engine. Patriarchal structures, rigid gender roles, and rampant intergenerational trauma create the absolute perfect breeding ground for covert narcissism.
Explain how culture builds the alien self.
When a culture demands profound emotional suppression, when we tell young boys that crying is weak and they must always be stoic, or when we tell young girls that their only value is in being perfectly accommodating and endlessly self-sacrificing, we are demanding the creation of an alien self.
When families operate on conditional love based entirely on achievements and aesthetics,
They are operating an assembly line, endlessly manufacturing new generations of covert narcissists who have no connection to their authentic emotional core.
okay, but what about the person listening right now? The person whose boss or spouse or parent is actively running this silent, malicious background software in their life today. What is the survival manual?
Step 1. Maintain absolute emotional neutrality. This is often called the gray rock method.
You must become as uninteresting and unreactive as a gray rock.
Do not feed their victimhood with excessive sympathy, and absolutely do not react with anger to their passive aggression. You must remove their power over your emotional state.
Because if you get angry, they win. They prove that you are the unstable one.
It's exactly. Step 2. Set ironclad behavioral boundaries and communicate them with zero emotion.
Like, I will not continue this conversation if you raise your voice. Or I will not accept blame for how your day went.
And the key is, you must enforce them every single time. If they cross the boundary, you leave the room. No debate.
And step 3.
Create a robust tether to reality. Because their primary weapon is gaslighting and warping your perception, you must have a strong outside support system.
You need friends, a therapist, or family members who are entirely outside the blast radius of the narcissist.
People who can validate your reality, listen to your experiences, and tell you objectively, no, you aren't crazy. That behavior is unacceptable, and that actually happened.
We have covered immense ground today. We've decoded the observable disguise of introversion and weaponized attunement. We've broken down the behavioral forensics of the conversation boomerang,
We expose the shocking overlap with psychopathy.
unpacked the mask model and EMA data, mapped the anatomy of implicit versus explicit shame, traced the developmental origins of the alien self.
Shattered the trauma bond myth, and laid out the clinical interventions.
We have taken you into the absolute darkest depths of the covert narcissist's operating system.
But before we conclude this investigation, there is one final provocative piece of research that we have to share. It's a concept called the belief in narcissistic insecurity, or BNI.
What exactly does that measure?
The BNI measures how people perceive narcissism.
Mm.
The research shows that highly educated lay people who read psychology books, who listen to deep dives like this one, understand the mask model.
They understand that grandiose, arrogant behavior often masks deep insecurity and shame.
Which means the education is working. People are understanding the pathology.
Yes.
However, the researchers found a secondary correlation that is deeply unsettling.
What did they find?
They found that individuals who score incredibly high in grandiose narcissism themselves are the most likely to weaponize this psychological knowledge.
Really?
They are the most likely to look at someone who is genuinely vulnerable, genuinely suffering, or genuinely anxious, and falsely accuse them of being a covert narcissist.
Let that sink in for a moment. The people who are quickest to point the finger, the people most eager to diagnose their exes or their coworkers as covert narcissists, are often grandiose narcissists who are projecting their own pathology onto a convenient victim.
They use the psychological terminology to gaslight true victims, labeling the victim's natural reaction to abuse as covert manipulation.
Which brings us right back to the tension we established at the very beginning of this deep dive. We asked you to look for a ghost. We warned you that you might recognize your boss, your ex, or yourself.
So as you spent the last hour identifying the covert narcissists in your life, building your profile, analyzing their every move, and diagnosing their communication patterns,
We have to leave you with a chilling question to mull over.
is it possible that your intense hypervigilance, your deep need to diagnose, analyze, and control the people around you is actually a projection of your own hidden vulnerabilities?
When you are obsessively hunting the ghost who is really wearing the mask,